The world's most hated billionaire is going into space in just a few short days, and hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition in the hopes that he stays there. While this trip isn't exactly what we think of when we think of a space trip, and is actually just an 11-minute suborbital journey that has a very slim chance of getting Jeff, his brother, and the rest of the crew lost in the vast darkness of outer space, we can always ask ourselves the question of what if? Hi guys, I am your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and buckle up your seatbelts for blast off because today we are talking space. More specifically, what if Jeff Bezos gets stuck in space? Let's start off with the boring Earth stuff first, just to get it out of the way. If Jeff Bezos was to get stuck in space, what would happen to his insanely large company Amazon? Well, honestly, most likely next to nothing. This space trip is coming just shortly after Jeff stepped down as the CEO of the company, which he created in 1994. He has passed the role over to Andy Jassy, who has been in charge of running Amazon's web services for a number of years. Andy has obviously proven himself to be more than capable of running this company, otherwise he not only wouldn't have had such an important and major role in it for so long, but Jeff also of course wouldn't be leaving it to him. Jeff may be hugely disliked, and for good reasons, but he clearly knows how to make smart business moves regardless of who gets hurt in the process. So, as Jeff steps down from his CEO position, he is moving over to become the executive chairman of Amazon's board. This means he's going to be working on things like the Amazon Day One Fund, which is designed to help fund existing nonprofits, the Bezos Earth Fund, which we won't even discuss the irony of, and of course Blue Origin, which is his spaceship company. These are the things that would see the most major impact if he were to get stuck or lost in space, with the biggest impact being on his spaceship company, seeing as this would not be a good sign if he got lost in one of their spaceships on a relatively safe space mission. We got there eventually, folks. I suppose this was an extremely long way of saying if Jeff Bezos got stuck in space, virtually nothing would change here on Earth. Now let's move on to what would be happening in space if this Blue Origin spacecraft gets lost out there. So let's say that they do get stuck in space, but it's on the ship. This could go one of a few ways. Either you'll run out of supplies and sustenance, which means you'll starve or dehydrate to death, which would be awful, or maybe the ship will run into something like an asteroid or too much radiation, which of course again will end up in death, albeit probably a bit of a quicker one. The seemingly best option would be if you were on the craft and somehow found the ability to regrow and regenerate all the things you'd need to survive. Well, then it would just be time that gets you in that instance. I truthfully don't know the details of how this last one would be possible or if it would be possible, but hey, we're just here to look at some things that may happen if this situation were to arise. So realistically, these all end in some kind of death, some worse than others, but I guess that's how everyone's life goes, even here on Earth. Now, let's take a look into what would happen if Jeff decided to do a spacewalk for some strange and unknown reason and ends up floating off into the unknown. Well, first of all, he'd be left there. I mean, what is anyone supposed to do? A rocket ship can't exactly slow down and open its doors so that you have the luxury to climb aboard at your leisure. I mean, there is one ship that does have a rescue-ready airlocked compartment, but it is in retirement, so good luck out there. Also, if it was that easy, wouldn't everyone be doing it? Basically, today's video is all about the multitude of ways you could pass away in space. It's my first video here on LBQ, and I guess it's a bit of a dark one. If you were floating around in space, not in a craft, but you did have a suit, there's a few options. First, you'll feel weightless and probably be spinning around, and depending on where you are, you could potentially fall back into Earth's atmosphere, which would probably have you burning up upon re-entry. If you happen to be wearing your emergency jetpack, there is a bit of hope for you, which I guess is good news. But let's say you're in a location where re-entry into Earth is not a likely possibility. Basically, you'll just continue floating around until you run out of oxygen, which is probably around 7.5 hours, which would be enough to see a few sunrises and sunsets and think about all of the things that led up to this moment. I guess it's not cool because you're gonna die, but it's like here on Earth, everyone would be like, that's sick. Since there is no oxygen in space, however, once you pass away, your body isn't going to decompose in the way that it does here on Earth. If you're near a source of heat, your body will actually mummify, but if you're not, and instead are in the cold space air, your body will probably freeze. And And since we're already here, let's just take a quick look at what would happen if Jeff got stuck floating out in space with no spacesuit on. Firstly, you would feel all of the air rush out of your lungs. There's no pressure in space, which means that air expands, so inevitably, it would tear through the tissues of your lungs, which I cannot say would be a nice thing to experience. This is why it would be better to exhale as much as possible rather than try and gulp in as much air as you can, but even so, because of the extreme environment in space, it would only be about 15 seconds before your body used up all of the oxygen stored in your blood and you'd just pass out. After this, of course, comes the loss of control over bodily functions, and we all know what that entails. But let's be real, we would all crap our pants if we were left out floating in space, whether it was due to a lack of oxygen or not. It is one of the most, if not the most, frightening things that could ever happen to a person. Next, the lower the pressure, the lower the boiling point. This means that since you'd be in a place with no pressure, it's entirely possible that the boiling point would lower to your own body temperature, which would have not only your saliva boiling off of your tongue, but your blood would also start to boil, and not in the figure of speech way. Of course, having boiling blood would come with its own issues, like the possibilities of it blocking blood flow to vital organs, or potentially causing a heart attack, and it most likely would burst some capillaries, so you'd be all bruised up as well. You'd also swell up and get really puffy because of all of the gas being built up. If you're facing the sun, you'd probably get a sunburn as well, and there's a good chance that you'd be so full of radiation that in the very small chance you have of surviving this whole ordeal, you'd probably later pass away from radiation poisoning or cancer. Alright, at this point I'm just rambling. There we have it. These are just some of the possibilities of what might happen if Jeff Bezos were to get lost on his upcoming trip to space. While the possibility of this happening is as small as the possibility of Amazon workers getting a fair wage or decent working conditions, we can always ask ourselves what if. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozolowski, and I hope I get to hang out with you guys again soon. Bye! Okay. Oh yeah, there is a little timer. Genius. Alright, first I'll be cute. Okay. I think I talk too fast. I think I gotta slow it down.
Yeah.
Cause this is a long script.
Yeah.
It's 1,500 words. And here I am, just flying through it.
Do it. I think it's good, because I think it's good.
Yeah, it looks good now.
Is that there?
Yeah.
Seats are-
Yeah.